So, leadership transformation groups, or LTG, what are they? I describe them as a place for leaders to increase their interpersonal skills through self-awareness and relational practice. What does that all mean in reality? Okay, so think about it in a few different ways. It's one part group coaching, one part group therapy, one part mastermind, and all parts community. So let me break down all those components so you have a better understanding of what I mean by those, and then we'll also walk through what this actually looks like in practice. So when I say group coaching, I use that to differentiate from individual one-on-one coaching. Whether you're working with me or another coach, or you've worked with a coach or a therapist in the past, you're familiar with the idea that when you work with somebody else, they can offer alternate perspectives, help you explore the way you're relating to specific challenges or situations, and really learn more about yourself in that process so that you can grow in your resourcefulness as you tackle challenges that life is throwing at you. Group coaching is very similar. However, instead of just one person who's serving in that spot, you have the group to bring their resources and their perspectives to bear on the client's end. And so part of LTG and part of the intent of LTG is to equip all members with some of the fundamental basics of coaching so that as a group they can help individual members in the group as they need that. Whatever situation, whatever challenge that individuals want to bring to the group can be a place for that individual to work through those challenges and gain more self-awareness, gain more clarity, gain more insight, gain more confidence. Now that's a bit different from what one might describe as a mastermind, right? A mastermind traditionally is more focused on sharing individual experiences and advice, and there's a little bit more of a vibe around here's what I think you should do. Coaching is a little bit distinct from that, right? Coaching is really meant to help the client gain their own answers through questioning, through listening, through curiosity, and so on and so forth. So there is going to be a place also for that mastermind dynamic that I just mentioned, because the members of these groups are founders and senior leaders at startups. They have a lot of relevant experience to bring to everyone and to you included. So I want to make sure to be clear that there is space for advice, there is space for suggestion in here, but we're just going to be very clear about when we're doing that, how we're framing this as coaching versus advice. Okay, so we've talked about there's this group coaching element to LTG. There's also this kind of mastermind, peer support, and advice component. And then the third component to LTG, which I think makes this really, really special, is that it borrows some concepts from group therapy, or if you're familiar with the idea of T groups or encounter groups, some of those same concepts. So if you're not familiar, what happens in group therapy is often these members will come in, they'll talk about their lives, their situations, their challenges, and in that process, the participants and the facilitator will bring a focus on what thoughts and feelings and experiences are happening in real time in the middle of the group. So an example of that might be, let's say that I say I'm really struggling with my co-founder, and we're locked in this conflict, and here's my side, here's their side, right? You might feel really frustrated when you listen to that. And so part of the kind of dynamic process that will take place in LTG is we'll encourage you to actually share that you're feeling frustrated in that moment, exactly in that moment. In therapy talk, we kind of talk about this idea of the here and now. And the reason we talk about that is because we want to take a look at emergent processes that come out because they're data. They're things for us to take a look at, and they are going to be indicators for how we typically show up in relation to other people in our lives. So another way of putting that is whatever patterns I'm likely to exhibit in my everyday life, I'm very, very likely to bring those same exact patterns into group, into the LTG. And so if we can trust that that's going to happen, part of the role of the group and part of my role as facilitator is to help each individual notice when their patterns of interaction are showing up. Patterns like going into conflict or conflict avoidance, the way we express disagreement or approval, the way we make requests, the way we ask questions, the way we get excited or shut down, and so on and so forth. And by bringing attention to those dynamics on a frequent basis throughout these LTG sessions, it's material for us to take a look at and to learn from. And the end result is we get to see what of those patterns are really helpful and we want to continue to use and are serving us, and what are those patterns that are not serving us as much, and how can we gain a better understanding of those patterns, or the way that we relate to certain people, the way we relate to different types of situations, and how might we find a new way forward? How might we create new possibilities for you, the individual, to relate to those recurring situations? The other thing I'll note is that the group composition really matters. So when it comes to bringing a diversity of backgrounds and even status within a company, whether founder or non-founder, the idea here is that you're going to be able to interact with people who you might not normally interact with, and in particular personalities that perhaps you're not getting exposed to very often, or perhaps you maybe have some difficulty with. And that too will be another source of learning for you. Because when it comes to building your interpersonal capacity, part of that means building our ability to relate to people who we might find a little bit upsetting, a little bit frustrating, or also alternatively the people who we get along with the best. Another thing that's worth mentioning is the idea of learning how a group forms and evolves over time. So when we start the LTG, it's going to be kicking off with strangers who don't know each other. And what's going to be really interesting to watch over the course of 6 months is, how does the group form over time? How is familiarity built? How is trust built? How is influence built? And how is group cohesion formed over time? So if you're a leader at a startup, this is going to be particularly relevant to you, because you want to understand, how do these human dynamics play out, and how can I notice the patterns in front of me so that I can take some of those learnings and take them over to my workplace. So there is this kind of meta form of learning, of observing the evolution of a group over time, and navigating all of the different stages of group development as well. And I think that's going to be an area of rich learning for everyone involved. So to sum it all up, LTG is really characterized by a few key components. The first is this group coaching element that I mentioned, the fact that you'll be able to get dynamic and varied support from the group and have all these different resources brought available to you. The second is this noticing of our patterns and figuring out what's happening between each person as it's unfolding, so that you can see what are the ways in which your interpersonal relating are helping and also holding you back. And then the third is this component around community and connection and support. And then lastly, this element of learning how a group forms over time and noticing the different stages of group development and seeing what you can take from that learning over into your workplace.